Impressive walls are great, but they're really just the waiter that serves up your main defensive dish, a good choke point. This video is going to help you make that entree as delectable and as deadly as possible, without relying on cheap tricks like manipulating the AI via pyres or trapping them in a box by building walls around them. Instead, you're going to maximize how much damage your villagers are doing and minimize how much they're taking. This allows for some incredible late game siege moments where you're heavily outnumbered but fighting them off despite that. The first step in all of this is understanding how enemies approach so that you can place your defenses properly. That includes in the early game before you can wall enemies off, in the mid game where you can but may have some extra entrances to make getting to nearby mines easier, and in the end game when you're going to be swarmed and vastly outnumbered in a stronghold that has but a single entrance. Although controlling the direction enemies come in is easier on mountains and hillsides where natural elevation changes help limit the angles they can attack, a few small towers on an open map will still work wonders. Have a single set of stairs up to a small platform, some merlons on the edge to give your archers cover in the archer versus archer fight, and park at least one melee fighter on top with some more cover there. You always want your archers to be on high ground because this confers a damage bonus, although do note that this is the same 1 level up as it is 4 levels up, so really tall towers are mostly for looks. If the raiders are attacking from a direction you don't have a tower in, you can still lure them over by leaving your melee fighter out. Run them close to the enemy, then run them back after the enemy starts to attack them. Have your archers pick their archers off, then focus on the nearest melee fighter while making sure that your archers are at least a couple tiles away so that they don't try to punch the enemy. Defense gets a lot more interesting in the mid game, when you've walled off your base and can build a proper choke to greet your invaders. When walling, there's a little bit more to understand about how enemies attack. Raiders will assault doors or colonists parked at entrances, but they won't attack walls. If there are more than one entrance, instead of grouping up around the nearest one, they'll continue swarming around and attack those other entrances. Enemies won't run through a villager who is standing their ground, but can move through one who is moving. In the mid game, you're likely going to have 1 or 2 doors on the side of your base to facilitate easy access to nearby mines. You should have some defenses near these, but an empty entrance on the far side will still draw most enemies in. You can leave an archer nearby to pick them off, although wait for enemy archers to run by if you are going to do this. The main entrance should feature more than a simple choke at this point. I'd recommend going for a tower with 3 levels. The entrance into your base should be on bottom, the top should feature an archer's platform with merlons on it to shoot out at approaching foes, and the second floor should feature walls on the outside to stop incoming fire, with openings in the floor that let your archers shoot down at enemies. Although you can have your archers outnumber and outfocus theirs, making their archers run means that they're effectively dead for the fight. You can maximize your damage out while minimizing damage in by instead making their archers run into melee range and firing down on all of their fighters inside. The bottom now should have at least 2 fighters stacked right behind each other. Two-handed weapons like the spear and longsword can attack from 2 tiles away, including through your allies. They can also attack through grated doors, which means that you can use these to keep settlers safe in a place where they can attack but can immediately retreat from at any point without being followed. This means that you can have at least 2 melee fighters even through a single file choke, and all of your archers hitting enemies, while only 1 or 2 of those foes can hit you back at a time. That philosophy of maximizing your damage uptime while minimizing theirs holds especially true into the late game. Unfortunately, the current state of pathfinding means that even huge raids of 50 or up to 100 enemies will only allow 20 or 30 to actually try and breach your entrance before too much time passes, and the enemy runs off after declaring the whole fight a loss for you. But it's still important to minimize how much damage you risk and to quickly kill the tougher advanced raiders that come through. To counterbalance this, late game design is when you can get the most fancy with it, and it's honestly my favorite despite the pathfinding issues. Your archer setup should look similar, although you do want more room. You're going to have near or over a double-digit number of archers. In general, you want 4 to 8 melee fighters, then stick a bow in everyone else's hands. Why do you want so many melee fighters? Two-handed weapons are incredibly powerful. Although shields do block damage from archers, they're inferior in direct hand-to-hand combat. Instead, you want to give everyone the best two-handed weapons you can get. That's generally longswords, although a mace or 2 to destroy armor can be really useful. Assuming you've got enough ore hauled to your base that you can avoid having other exits, you can door up this main entrance as much as possible. Either way, you're going to want to move away from a linear path in and towards an arc. That means a structure that looks like this for 3 to 4 melee fighters. Then you'll get rid of walls and put your soldiers there as you get more, up to something that eventually looks like this. This allows 8 people, all with two-handed weapons, that hit this front enemy. Technically, a second enemy behind them can hit one of your foes as well, but there's no way to avoid this. They're going to be focused down quick and not do much damage in turn. Your archers should prioritize theirs first, since they're going to be doing damage back to you, and then if enemies that run in with two-handed weapons. Not only will enemies with a shield deflect some fire, enemies with two-handed weapons can attack from further away, which gums up your meat grinder. That'll turn your 8-on-1 into an 8-on-2, and why allow something that even slightly resembles an almost fair fight? Your walls can and probably should have some flooring going around the edge to pick off raiders along them. As long as your archers are shooting out without getting shot back, it's free damage you can take advantage of. But let's put this all into action. We have 20 people, of which 16 are fighters, in a walled off area with a single entrance. Half of them are skill 15 for high tier weapons like heavy crossbows and longswords, and half are below that for mid-tier weapons like light crossbows, spears, and maces. They're going to be facing off against a similarly equipped army that outnumbers us more than 3 to 1 on the highest difficulty of survival. All of our archers are lined up in a firing squad, and our melee fighters form that delicious arc. Their archers that run in face a firing line of our own and are immediately traded out. Meanwhile, their melee fighters that manage to come in get dropped by an onslaught of attacks without getting out more than one of their own. Hopefully the pathfinding changes in the next major update will mean that raids can last longer, and you'll actually have to chop through all 50 or 100 foes, but I've tested this a few times now, and didn't even come close to taking a loss in my forces, while cutting down 20 or 30 of them each time. If you have even more colonists, you can expand the number of archers and have a few backup melee fighters to replace those of yours that do get injured in the fight. But a fighting force is only as strong as it can be supplied with. Click here for some advice on how to make an efficient base that really gets this stuff going quickly. If you're thinking that something like this makes the game look too easy, I've got some good news for you. I'm working on a series called The Impossible Run, and we're not going to get even close to a defensive setup like this. Make sure to sub if you're interested in seeing what that looks like.